All right, crypto market update, folks. Bit of a quicker update today. I have to hit the road, so this will be about 10 to 15 minutes. However, tomorrow and later in the week, we can dive into some longer updates. So, I'm going to paint bull and bear scenario with Bitcoin. I'll talk a little bit about my hypothesis and the overall, altcoin markets and even stuff like Tezos dropping a lot and so on and so forth. And then what my ultimate focus and ultimate goal is in all of this chaos that the markets are experiencing. So obviously, anyone who's involved in crypto, whether you're an investor or a trader, is probably feeling a bit of a pinch in this market. Generally bear market, not bear markets, bull markets generally tend to be very good for building up wealth. And then bear markets, you can still make money in bear markets, but oftentimes preservation and is the goal, the long-term goal. Preservation and then being able to plant seeds for the next cycle, thinking about the big picture here. So looking at Bitcoin. So on the bear side, obviously Bitcoin's being a little bit sluggish, right? It's like a little bit of a pennant-like formation here. We did have a nice, clean double bottom here. Nice little bounce, but it obviously hit resistance. If it had broke up above this, it could have been a bit of a lopsided inverse head and shoulders. We broke below this, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to bleed out more. If it does bleed out more, then obviously we'll probably see a lot more red in altcoins, and then ultimately we would likely tag this 3K area, right? So if we were to look at this on the 1 week, so we'd likely tag here, and it would wick down on the weekly, right? Because this does kind of look a little bit bear-like, but I'm going to paint the bull scenario as well, right? Because I want to show you what could happen. One of the things I've noticed on a lot of these bounce plays is they've been a little choppier at support, right? Like for the majority of last year and previous years, oftentimes you get not last year, but yeah, you get these sharp V bottoms, even the beginning of this year. But then since this moment over to here from this bounce and then the ones that followed, you can kind of see they haven't been very sharp. They've been rounding out, almost like chopping out at support, and then you get a big candle that pushes up and so on and so forth. And same here, right? So we could be creating that sort of same pattern. The case for that is, you notice this, so you see the stochastic RSI is kind of crossing down here, crossing here, and it may cross down here at similar area. See these transition candles where you have a week of grind, right? So you have this little, this hammer candle here, and then they followed by a bounce. So there's a bit of sideways grinding at support. So we had a green candle here, and this could be continuation. It could just be a breakdown like over in that area, but it could round out because even in these ones, it wicked down and then shot straight up, right? So here's the thing. If the market does bounce off of current levels, and if we do have a nice solid green week, that could at least take us to the 5K area or 55 or 6K, various different zones that I'd be looking at. In my opinion, I think it's a good idea to do some bag cleanup on the green. That's one of the things I'll be doing. The reason why I say that is because we are in December, and one thing that does tend to happen last minute at the end of December, maybe not so much for retail investors in the States because they have limited write-offs and what they can claim for losses if they're not an LLC. but there's a lot of tax harvesting that tends to happen at end of year. So if there's any like larger institutions or businesses or anything like that that have experienced big drawdowns last year, there might be some additional selling as a result of some tax harvesting, right? And then that will probably blow over as we go into the new year. Into the new year, we basically approach the backed New York Stock Exchange as well as NASDAQ launching the future. So we'll probably see some 2019 hype in relation to that, right? So my ultimate goal right now, as the prices are going lower and lower, my ultimate goal, like I said before, is the lower it goes, I'm going to basically... So like I mentioned before, in my opinion, what I think is the biggest Grand Slam strategy is trading from accumulation to parabolic blow off top, right? Basically, accumulate stuff when Bitcoin is dead, hold stuff for multi-year trend, and then sell when the angles of the market end up going parabolic, when the trend is no longer sustainable, right? But obviously, buying and accumulation and capitulation and stuff when everything is dead is a lot easier said than done, right? So obviously, in my opinion, I think that's the most profitable Grand Slam strategy that I can imagine or that I've experienced in this past cycle, right? That's the one biggest lesson that I've taken away over the past 4 years. That's the biggest lesson. So, in the event that Bitcoin does drop lower, then obviously 85% drop off the top does take us to that 3K mark, right? If it goes lower than 3K, then it means that the price has dropped lower than in 2014 on a market that has 100x the liquidity, right? So, I mean, it always could drop lower. Anything is possible. There's a very interesting video that I retweeted about how anytime there's a lot of FUD in the media, we've been seeing a lot of FUD, that there's been evidence, like especially if some of the big financial institutions talk trash about crypto, there's been evidence afterwards of them actually buying crypto or trading it while they're talking crap about it, right? So what's interesting is that, last year a lot of folks talked about institutional money coming in, Wall Street money coming in, so on and so forth. But I think the general consensus or the general thought amongst the markets and market sentiment was that somehow Wall Street coming in would magically, pump our $20,000 Bitcoin to $100,000 because they love buying parabolic markets, right? When in reality, who's to say, and this is all just speculation, but in reality, who's to say those institutions getting involved isn't about pushing the price down as low as they can to be able to accumulate low before the next wave of retail. Anyways, that's kind of the thoughts that that I've been thinking about in relation to that, so on and so forth. So that's Bitcoin. That's pretty much kind of where Bitcoin's at. As we don't know how long this is going to last for. I mean, there's a possibility. It seems to be tracking 2014 fairly well, except for this compression that we've had here. That was a little bit different. And I think this is the result, this compression sideways that we had for the past 4 months. I think that this is just a result of also increased liquidity as well. You'll see the 2014 charts have a lot more spikes and volatility on some of the breakdowns and such. So we don't know how long it could last. I mean, if it did maybe we have another year of accumulation, who knows? Or maybe it's a quick recovery, kind of like 2013. Maybe it's like a double bubble, and then next year we end up having like a quicker recovery. But all I know is that the money that I put in my trading accounts was money that I had hedged when the price was higher. Now that the price is lower, even though I'm not necessarily nailing the bottom or whatnot, I'm basically just averaging down as the price goes lower and getting back to a place where that fiat that was hedged will be 100% back in crypto. And also a large chunk of that has been siphoned off for investment wise, and a lot more will be. I'm going to actually reduce what I have on the exchanges considerably if the price goes lower and I buy more, and I'm just going to withdraw stuff and put in hardware wallets again, right? Minimize counterparty risk, and also think about the larger picture cycle, multi-year hold, minimize tax gains on stuff. I'll try to separate coins that I invest in from coins that I trade, and so on and so forth. That's a good strategy too, depending on where you're at as far as jurisdiction. If you're in an area where everything's cost averaged, you probably don't want to trade with coins that you're invested in long term, just from a cost average, just from a tax perspective, because then you could end up paying gains tax or whatever every time you sell. So obviously, in relation to Bitcoin and the extreme correlation, altcoins are likely probably not going to recover until Bitcoin has a nice little bounce, right? Until Bitcoin has a trend reversal, and then obviously everything will rise with the tides, right? Now, in relation to some of my longer term bags right now, Tezos dropping even more. So obviously, having scooped up a crap load of Tezos up above $1, and this, having been accumulated bunch up in this area, certainly feeling the pinch on this investment, right? So it's dropped a lot more. I've been buying down through here as well, and if this does break down further, like if we did end up seeing some really abysmal level, I mean, I've got some orders at 40 cents, 30 cents, but at 20 cents, if we go in at 20 cents, I'm basically going to probably use that cheaper price to double my entire position size on it. So in some ways, I'm kind of buying more Tezos than I originally anticipated, because I got a little bit too, all that sideways boring chop made me a little bit too keen to accumulate Tezos, which obviously wasn't the best move. But I'm building up my Tezos war chest so that when we do hit the next cycle, I want to build up this as a significant source of passive income. Now, on a fundamental note, when we look at crypto and we ask ourselves, okay, why would something like Tezos, if Tezos is so promising or the tech is great or it's doing so on and so forth, why would it just be continuously selling off and so on and so forth? And these questions might come to mind. I believe there's a couple answers to that. Number one is obviously everything's bleeding because everything's correlated. Number two, in my opinion, Tezos is actually still in price discovery right now. In my opinion, the Tezos, even though we had these Tezos futures contracts over here, this was very deceptive because it wasn't actually dealing with real supply and demand dynamics. It was a synthetic market with synthetic supply, right? I do believe Tezos can hit those higher prices, but I don't believe this was true price discovery because these were like pre-market futures, right? But right now, since the actual launch of the live network, we are in early price discovery, and it's doing what most coin projects typically do when they list on the exchanges or so on and so forth. There's usually a long, prolonged sell-off until they establish a floor and then hit a reversal. And sometimes the floor can actually be very quick. But also, on a fundamental note, aside from correlation in the market and altcoins, altcoins for the most part tend to be a part of a supply and demand dynamic. That's the biggest fundamentals. And so with this, right now, what you end up having, because the ecosystem is really, really new and early, most of what the focus is on right now is just building up the ecosystem, training developers. I actually saw a post today on their GitHub how they're integrating. They may be integrating Zsnarks right now. So there's some activity where they're implementing Zcash privacy technology into this, right? So there's a lot of focus on development, but when a new network and a new project's being built, it's not very sexy. It's not very sexy to the overall general public, and it doesn't really affect the supply and demand dynamic, because what you have right now is you have a lot of people who are staking, who are making passive income, and some of those people, that actually creates selling pressure, right? For myself, I have no intentions of selling any XTZ. I'm in this for the long bumpy ride. I have no intentions of selling anything that I accumulate in the wallet until at least $10. If we hit $10, no guarantees, but if we did, my plan for that, and it could take a year or even longer, but my plan for that is at this double-digit milestone, anything that I accumulated in the wallet through the baking rewards will be sold at that level. I'm not going to touch my principal, but will be sold then. And then my principal amount, I'll skim some off the top. If we ever did hit like $50 or whatnot, I would sell a nice large chunk. So someone's asking, how about selling XTZ now and buying at 20 cents? Well, here's the thing, right? I'm not necessarily predicting that it will go down to 20 cents. Ultimately, I don't know where it's going to find its floor. So I can't really, everyone's got to kind of decide what's good for them. Personally, myself, I'm not really interested in selling anything. Even if I could buy it at 20 cents, I'm not going to, I'm personally just not going to take that risk. I'm just kind of looking at it more as an investment. And I'll once we hit that level and I double down my position, I'll be done at that point, and just play the waiting game. But obviously everyone's got to decide what's good for them, so I can't really say yay or nay if that's a good idea. I personally don't necessarily think that would be something that I would do, but it all depends on other variables. So anyways, in relation to that, the things that affect demand, just like what we saw with Ethereum, is when you have new dApps created, new projects created, new ICOs or crowd funds or security tokens or anything with that building. Like once developers are trained, once businesses start to launch around it, this is where the demand dynamic comes in. But we're not there yet, right? The only demand that we would have on this right now is speculative demand, as far as people perhaps buying in relation to wanting to bake or thinking that it'll go up in future or so on and so forth. But there's not a lot of business activity on the network right now because it's still only, maybe a month old or whatnot, for there to be that supply and demand dynamic to be affected. Ethereum ballooned because ICOs were going so hot, and so everyone needed Ethereum to send to participate in these ICOs and so on and so forth. We probably won't have that same level of ICO boom again now that regulations have given clear guidelines on what can and cannot be done. But obviously, security tokens and decentralized applications, all that stuff, even dApps and all that, that's all still very new and could be a very big industry moving forward, right? So that's pretty much my thoughts on that. Even though I'm definitely feeling the pinch, I've got a pretty big drawdown from what I bought here. I'm staying the course. Nothing's changed in my plan. I mean, when I was buying, I did acknowledge the possibility that it could drop lower, and obviously Bitcoin could break down and so on and so forth. So at this point, it's kind of like, I'm just treating this like as if I were accumulating ETH or some other altcoin for a multi-year hold. And then, once we do hit a reversal, we'll likely see the everything just rising with the tides, right? Just like we saw last year. And then, in the bull trend, it's like the bear trend's like, you people ask themselves, when is it going to stop selling? Wow, this just keeps selling off. It's so grindy, it's so choppy. Selling. It seems like it never ends, right? And then same with the bull trend. Like for like a solid year of just buying and retraces and things just going parabolic, and when you think it's a top, it goes up higher and higher and higher, right? Almost like eventually you kind of get exhausted from things going up so much. The same thing happens in reverse in the bear trend. It's like exhaustion from things selling off so much, right? So at these moments in time, in my opinion, just like in 2015, the thing that I focused on the most in 2015 with this really choppy, grindy, sideways market and things selling off and these big capitulations and stuff was just really focusing on the big picture. And, I pretty much had a good solid 2 years of accumulation in Bitcoin. I spent 2015 doing everything I could to accumulate, 2016 doing everything I could. And then even before Bitcoin broke out of the all-time high in that little alt season, the alt flipping season, there was some accumulation that happened there as a result of increasing my Bitcoin through flipping altcoins, right? And so that's a slow process. That wasn't instant, right? This was like a year here, then another year, and then, several months of alt season, and then Bitcoin went nuts. Then it went nuts, right? So that's my thoughts. I'm focusing on the bigger picture, the long game right now. This is the thing that interests me the most with these lower prices, more so than trying to get immediate, 10, 20, 30, 50% gains or even doubles or whatever. If we pop a bunch of doubles on stuff, if Bitcoin does bounce and things do explode, I will do some bag cleanup on stuff that I don't necessarily want to have as longer term investments. But I'm still going to be focusing a lot of my energy on that freed up capital, on putting it into longer term investments and just pulling more money off the exchanges. So obviously Tezos and Zcash are the two biggies, but there'll probably be a few more that I'm going to start looking at. I do have a little bit of, I still have some ZRX as a longer term investment. I don't think I'll be adding too much to that because it is still way up above ICO price. And I'm probably going to do, I do have some hollows, a longer term investment as well. And I'm probably going to do a bit of a dive to pick another, I have a bit of polymath, but to do a dive and pick another thing that I think is viable. I won't go in as heavy as Tezos or Zcash, but I'm going to look to pick another option to accumulate or just to buy some as a longer term multi-year investment. I'm thinking my timeline that I'm working with right now is about 2020 to 2021, right around the Bitcoin halving. Good news is 2018 is almost over. So it went by fairly quickly, 2018. And 2019 is probably going to start moving fairly fast too. So that gets us, it's not, 2020 is not too far away. So this is how I end up having the stamina and the equanimity with lower prices, or even having some of my larger accumulated investments like this going down, is I just focus on the bigger picture. It'll probably be a different trend, a different scope. The industry will certainly be different. It'll probably be a lot more mature. I foresee that at that time we'll probably see a lot more larger institutional type exchanges and so on and so forth. So that's my main focus right now, right? Instead of sweating all the little stuff. Eventually, my goal at the end of this, I don't know where the bottom will be, but my goal, whether we go sideways here, whether we bounce, whether we go lower, my goal will be to be back 100% in crypto on my trading accounts. That's not including anything else that was diversified out of the markets and so on and so forth. So that's pretty much it. Same reviews as before. And tomorrow and later on the week, we'll go into some longer updates and look at that, and perhaps look at some other markets and answer questions. But that's it for now. We'll end it there. And I'll see you all in tomorrow's update. Take care, folks. Cheers.